So I get asked, why do I always start videos with so? I get asked a lot online about how to start by upcoming sport photographers and people who want to get into the industry. And essentially what it boils down to is people want to know how you get accredited for big events. London Marathon, England Netball, World Triathlon Series events. You know, how do you get those big accreditations for those big events, those big spectaculars, where you can get really, really cool images. And I think what people need to understand, and what new sports photographers coming into the field need to understand, is that that's a process that starts, 27 million steps back. It's not something that you don't just write off to the London Marathon media accreditation and say, yeah, I want an accreditation, please. I'm an independent freelancer and I'm a blogger, or I'm this and I'm that, and there you go, you get accreditation. It's not how it works. And different events and different organisations have different rules and regulations on it, and you need to be working with certain people in order to get those accreditations, and sometimes for events that's easier than others, and there's a whole mix mash of stuff. But essentially what you need to do is start a lot further back down the process. What happens is people think you just rock up to those big events and that's how you start, and there's two ways to do it. As far as I'm concerned, there's two ways to do it, and I learned one way from a very good photographer who I know, a friend of mine called Dan Bathy, who, I'm really coldy today, sorry. If I sneeze, I apologise. Dan is a motorsport photographer from Derbyshire. He works on, and has worked on, things like British touring cars, Formula E, stuff like that. He does things with Porsche and people like that. He's wildly talented, and I love his stuff. His stuff's brilliant. And I remember him telling me once that I was going for my first British touring car race years and years ago, and I was there to photograph it, and I was getting the media accreditation, and I remember saying to Dan, what do I do, where are good spots to do? And Dan said, and it's stuck with me ever since, and to be fair, it's something I still do now, that you actually get great shots from the spectator area if you know how to take great photos. You don't need to be front and centre to get really, really good stuff. You get unique things front and centre, and kind of in the mix and in the action, but you don't necessarily get you can get really, really good stuff from spectators, basically, and that stuck in my mind. So one thing that you can do if you're starting out is you can go to the London Marathon as a spectator, and you can look to create some really unique, different images from that 26.2 mile race, one of the biggest marathons, if not the biggest supported marathon in the world. As an accredited photographer last year, I can tell you that nearly all of my images came from spectator areas, even though I was accredited, even though somewhere up there's a media bib and a pass. All that allowed me to do was get in and out of certain areas, and I made a choice actually for that race not to go to the finish line with everybody else. But that's ultimately what it would have allowed me to do. The rest of my stuff came from that race, came from spectators. So if you're starting out, that's one thing to do, is to get yourself to events, get yourself to races, get yourself whatever sport it may be. And it's a bit difficult, I guess, with things like football and rugby at a big national level. You can't really go to the rugby premiership and just take your camera because they're not going to let you in. But you could go to events where you do have the ability to take your camera and do some stuff. And to be fair, you can take a DSLR camera in a bag with a 50mm lens on it and still get some brilliant stuff. You don't need a 600mm lens in order to get amazing things. So you have to think out of the box a little bit when you're starting out. And going to those big events as a spectator is one way to do it. It's how I've done it. My first foray into triathlon was at the British Mixed Relay race. Oh, blimey. September a couple of years ago, 2017, 16, whatever it was. And I wasn't accredited for that. I was from the media area, and it got me noticed by my images from that race got me noticed by athletes and brands, and a couple of other people who were key in getting me accredited for the races the following year on the World Series. So, a lot can be done from spectators. You can do a lot of damage from spectator areas, and you shouldn't disregard it. Don't just think that you need to have a pass and you need to be accredited and you need to have access in order to get great photos. You don't. London Marathon, for example, I was pretty much, aside from another photographer, alone on Tower Bridge as the elite women came through last year. And on the other side of the road, it was a spectator area, and I'd have got the same kind of shots from the other side of the road. But because I was accredited, I could basically walk down that down a section that had nobody in, so I had a little bit of better kind of movement and better access, but could have got exactly the same photos from the other side where spectators are. So that's thing number one. The other thing is to get to every local race, every local event, every local match, whatever it might be, and take photos, and take lots of photos, and take so many photos that your work just naturally progresses. So when I started the business a couple of years ago, I went to park runs, I went to fell races, kind of like local mountain and trail races in the UK. And I did that consistently for months and months and months. And what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to build a portfolio of work. And that portfolio of work allowed me to approach other races and other events that I wanted to shoot on that would be a bit like a stepping stone into some of the bigger arenas. So don't disregard local things. You know, if you want to be a running photographer like me or Ian Corliss or whoever, then don't be afraid to turn up at your local park run and take a bunch of photos. The best way to do that is to ask first. So I would, when I started, I would email out or get in contact with local race directors and say, look, I'm a local sports photographer, this is what I do, this is some of the work I create. Can I come down and take some photos for free? You can use anything I get, it's all yours. I just want the opportunity to take some photos. But I appreciate that you have other photographers who might be there who are used to being the photographer for that race, and I don't want to tread on any toes. So let me know. And that was my standard email that I would send out to, I don't know, 20, 30 races over a month, just to see where I could go and see what I could get. And from there, because I was working at so much stuff to start with, I could build a body of work. And that body of work then allowed me to email race directors and events around the country and say, this is the work that I create, this is the work that I do. I see you've got photographers already, but I want to offer you something slightly different. Would you be interested in having me there for your race? If they reply, not everybody does, and that's just the way it is, you've got to accept that. If they replied and if they said, yeah, okay, we'll do it, how much does it cost? Then I could go in with a fee and say, yeah, this is how much I charge for this. And that's how you start. That's how I really started. It was a mix of the two things. It was going to lots and lots of races locally, lots of events locally, and just being able to shoot and take photos and share it all online and let people kind of share my images and tag as many people in as I could and kind of get noticed. And then it was a case of going to some bigger spectacular events as a spectator and shooting from spectator areas to get really good stuff. Doing that gives you a bit of a unique perspective, and it gives you plenty of work to then use to leverage when you're speaking to brands and races and events and whatever it might be. What then happens once you've built that body of work and once you're actively working the environment, the way you get accredited for a race is to say to a brand or a media outlet or some news service or something, this is what I do, this is what I create, can we look to work together on this? You know, can I sell you images afterwards, etc., etc., etc. That's how you get accredited for big races and big events. So all that body of work beforehand, which gives you leverage to then say to a brand or an event or whoever, a media outlet, and say, yeah, can I come and work with you on this race? Can I come and work with you on this event? And don't go after the London Marathon. Don't go after Virgin because you'll not get a sniff at it. But there's plenty of brands and there's plenty of sponsors and companies who work and support big events and big races and big matches and all that kind of stuff that you can go to and say, look, hire me to create some work for you that shows off your involvement in this space. And from there, you can then get your foot in the door and you can work up through the clients. And that's really how it's done. So don't expect to be able to just fire in a application on a media accreditation and just walk in without kind of anything, because that's not how it works. You need to be able to regularly produce work of decent quality, and you do that by either getting to spectator areas and big events. Yeah, I ran out of video length I didn't realise that the limit for my phone camera is 10 minutes, so I kind of waffled and rambled on. So I'm going to record the second bit now, and hopefully it'll be all seamless and you won't need it as well. So, where were we? The way it's done is working your way up back through the ranks. It's putting quality work together as much as you can and working into bigger clients and using those clients to leverage your media accreditation. Everything that I've done so far that's been accredited, I've been there for a brand or a athlete or some kind of photo service that allowed me to be there to shoot. You don't just write down, "Well, this is my name and I take photos and please let me have one." So what I would say to anyone starting out is just start building up that portfolio of really, really good work. Get to big events if you can, shoot from spectators, get to local races, local events, whatever it might be, and build up a really good body of work that allows you to then go to those brands and go from there. And really it's just about time, and it's about patience, and it's about kind of working the problem and enjoying that process of getting from basically A to Z, from beginning to end. And personally, I'm about a third of the way through the process right now. I'm very fortunate enough to have been included in and worked on some pretty big races, and there's some even bigger ones in this year for the 2019 calendar. But yeah, it's a long process. It isn't just filling a form out and hoping you get in. So just keep working and it will come off. You just have to keep pushing on. Have a good one.